Right, here is my update for 31st of January 2023. It's a spiritual update, but it's based on what's on the surface, which is physical, because that's the part we see and that's the part we know about, but it's all based on spiritual principles. Now, the big thing about 2023 is the dark side, the satanic forces, the enemy, whatever you would like to call it, is ramping up and getting very busy, and people are pretty much blind to it and deaf to it. And I've discovered so many people, especially on the internet, you can tell them something they believe is completely wrong and they still believe it. You can show them diagrams, everything else, and you just get abuse. So it's difficult, but the good news is you don't have to wake up absolutely everybody. You just need to have enough people who are woken up, and they will, let's move that, they will end up doing the job for everyone else. You only need a maximum amount of people to be awake, and they will blow it apart and get rid of all the rubbish. So what's happening is that our enemy is becoming more and more bold. Instead of just doing subtle things and saying they're in our own interest, which they never are, they're doing some really crazy things, and they get crazier and crazier. And I believe this is in order for them to show it up, because if you've got a turd in your carpet, it's invisible. You say, what's that smell? I don't know where it is, but there's always that smell. I don't know where it's coming from. So you know something's wrong, but you don't know where it is. But when they come up and you get the fluorescent light or whatever, the black light, put it on and it glows, oh, there's a turd there, you don't leave it there, you clear it away. And I think that the dark side, Satan, whatever you want to call it, is making itself more and more known. Say, woo, I'm here, not because it's more evil, but because it's the end. This is the end. Whether you're religious or not, it's irrelevant, because it's in the Old and New Testament. Good shall appear evil, light shall appear dark, bitter shall appear sweet, and it's all lies, and you see through it. And when you see through it, you clear your house, and that's what happens. You clear the house and you get rid of it. And it's not down to politicians, it's down to us, and the politicians work for us. They represent us, they don't rule us. So if you want something done, just like we got Brexit, all you need is enough support, and with only 2 MPs and a load of MEPs, poor old David Cameron, the last thing he wanted was to leave the EU, but he had to offer the referendum, which he thought he'd win, because he knew the pressure was so bad if he didn't do it he might get thrown out. So, you know, in a democratic country you can do it, and if you're not in a democratic country, you have a revolution and become a democratic country, because there is no excuse. You know, if in America the Constitution allows people to be armed so that the government cannot take over in a military coup. You know, it's been done many times. It happened in Spain, it's happened in other countries. So anyway, but even if they don't, we will do it for them. So the next thing is, never understand your enemy. It's not necessary, because you'll go as crazy as they are. Just say they are our enemy, they are going to do all they can to win, and we benefit in no way when they lie to us and say it's for our own good, because you don't pay more for something than it's worth. You don't suffer for anything more than you might suffer in the future if you do it or don't do it. So really, this suffering is more than anyone should go through, and the more people suffer, of course, the more they'll do something about it. Now, to you and me and many other people, so it's obvious you're doing something which is painful, and of course it's going to cause pain, and it's not going to help you. So unless you're in immediate danger, you don't do it, but they do it. And they're going through a list now of things which I will go through, and the thing is that each one of them becomes worse and more blatant and crossing more people's red lines. And what do you do when you cross people's red lines? They don't like it, and they do something about it, and they kick out the rubbish, or they certainly do what they can. And you can't rely on the politicians to do it, you've got to rely on yourselves to do it, because, sorry, when you're doing it yourself, the politicians listen if you do it in an organised way. If you don't like the politicians, you get rid of them. So if you don't like your roads being closed, you vote in a council, and there's plenty of parties who will not close your roads, because if that's the most important thing, it's got to be like Brexit. a single party, a single issue formula, and you'd work on a single issue. So if we go through the spiritual war as it is, because it's all coming from the same source, they all want to destroy our lives. We are getting the 15-minute cities this year. Starts off with Oxford and Canterbury, then Bath, and then Edinburgh, then Norfolk, and then New Zealand and New York, all announcing 15-minute cities. So they're dividing a city into quarters, and you cannot drive from one quarter to another. You have to go out and come back. Now in Oxford, a woman said that her grandson is collected every day from school. It takes them 10 minutes to go 2 miles and 10 minutes to go back. She will have to go 20 minutes out, 20 minutes back, and do 10 miles every day, using more fuel, more energy and more time, and time is money, and that will be everyone. And the Oxford Ring Road is bad at the best of times, so if everyone has to go on the Oxford Ring Road, it will be jammed, and that is making things worse. Now 20-mile-an-hour zones, which some are trying to get for the whole country, the House of Lords admitted all these 20-mile-an-hour zones, closed roads, everything else, are not for the environment or for the air or for the planet. They are there to put people off driving. And the question is why? And then my formula comes in: don't ask why, because it doesn't matter. You have to beat the enemy. If you try and understand them, you'll go as crazy as they are. Just say they've got their interests, we've got our interests, they're not the same, beat them. So that's how that happens. What else do they want to do? They want to cut off our gas supply entirely. How do you cut off the gas supply? Well, you replace your gas oven with electric ovens. That's just about doable, but then you have to replace your central heating. Currently there is no alternative to central heating. They've got these electric heat pumps which suck the air, put an electric current through it, and then pump it through tubes to try and heat your radiators. The trouble is they cost 4 times as much or so. They're a lot bigger than boilers. They live outside, not inside, and you often have to change the pipework in your house to fit it. So they cost a fortune. They use far more electricity to use than the gas central heating does, and they don't really work once it gets too cold outside, and they don't heat your water quite hot enough to get rid of the germs. Other than that, they're great. Now, without subsidies or laws, they wouldn't exist. Neither would wind farms or solar farms, but they do because they've been paid for directly from your taxes. Why have they done it? Oh, they say it's to save the planet. Well, from what? Not from anything I can measure, and believe me, the global warming is another issue. You can find out about that all over the place. You don't need me to tell you that. It's on my other sites. Informrevolution.blogspot.com is my blog, and they took away my climate blog because it was so good. They didn't like it. People were watching it and believing it, so it's now on Typepad. I had to move it. So we're getting, all our cars are going to be taken away from us, all our gas is going to be taken away from us, and if you use logic, of course, the electric cars are now becoming quite popular, and people are ringing up the radio and writing in the newspaper saying, well, you know, it was only a 30-mile journey, but it was cold and the car had a lot less power than it said it would, and we needed to charge it up, and then half the chargers were broken, and the ones that weren't broken needed the wrong plug. And when we finally got to the one on the motorway services which had the right plug, there were 3 people in front of us. It's only going to get worse, because the more electric cars you have, which do cost a lot more than the others, and also cost as much to charge up now than they would do to fill with petrol, so that saving has gone, and they will be paying road tax from next year, so that saving is gone. On a long journey, what do you do when it's very cold outside and it's dark and it's wet, and it takes you between 5 minutes for a very fast Tesla charge, if you're lucky, to an hour for a normal charge? If you've got a normal car and a normal charger, you will be hanging about in the cold and dark in a random place, if you get there in time, for your car to charge. What do you do during that period? I don't know. I've seen them. There's one at the bottom of the road where I go shopping. There's always 1 or 2 taxis and driving instructors sitting morosely in their car at -2 degrees in the dark as the car is plugged in, and they're probably paying as much as they would to fill the petrol. One taxi driver said that they had to spend 2 hours a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, charging, and it's costing them a fortune. and they're giving back the electric taxi because it's no bloody good. So these are the things which are obvious to most people, that it's guaranteed not to produce what you want, just like solar panels on your roof are not guaranteed to do what you want, because take away the subsidies, you are paying about £8,000 and you save a few £100 a year. So you're paying for all your energy up front, then you've got to pay for inverters which convert it from DC to AC, that's right, and various other rewiring and work, and then you've got to clean them every year, and they're on the roof, so somebody has to go up and clean them, otherwise they don't work very well, especially if there's snow on them or moss. So you know, they do require some maintenance, and people still buy them. Why? It's a virtue signal. Look, I've got these things. Oh, it's free to get. You know, all the energy I get is free. Well, you've already paid for it up front. It's not free, and it's not guaranteed. When you turn your gas on, while you've still got gas, you know exactly how much it's going to cost, and you know exactly what it's going to do, because it's always constant and always reliable. Not with your solar panels or electric boilers or whatever you're using, or electric cars. They are a little bit unreliable or not quite up to the job, and they're making you do it. There's no excuse to do it. It's not going to save the planet. Trust me, it will not make any difference. So the people in Hackney, whose councillors just announced they're going to close 75% of the roads, will vote them out. You know, they've got Reform, they've got UKIP, just vote them in. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't happen once. Everywhere is doing it at the same time, because they're all working under United Nations Agenda 2030 or 2021. So, you know, it's all done by consent, and the consent has to be taken away. And what's the next one we've got? Is transgender. Well, somebody got apparently 3 years in prison in Norway for saying men can't be lesbians. So we've got thought crimes. Somebody else got an injunction for standing on a corner of a street by a closed abortion clinic in London, which was part of a zone where people can't protest against abortions. They said, "Are you praying?" She says, "Only in my head," and she got prosecuted and charged for praying in her head. So that's a thought crime. So, you know, there's plenty of thought crimes. We get a bit of Sharia law and blasphemy law as well coming in through the back door. That'll be next, because we allow it. So we're going back hundreds and hundreds of years or more, in the name of what? Diversity and inclusion? No, not really. Be kind. Well, listen to what they've said to J.K. Rowling, who dares to say that men and women are different. Now, red pilling, waking people up, is the alarm. Because what frightens me the most is that the people who have believed all this junk ignore the evidence when you show it to them. That is frightening, because it means they've been so well programmed that they are immune to any alarm clock. They're so deeply asleep, blind, deaf and dumb, nothing will get through to them, so we can forget them. We don't need them. But what's happening is when people are affected directly, you will find that they wake up. And there are two sorts of waking up. There's the little window. So Dr. Robert Winston, who is a great climate activist, woke up on Question Time where he was asked about transgender. He says there's no such thing, you're a man or a woman. So I'm sure he got plenty of death threats for that from the Be Kind Brigade. You never get death threats from libertarians, because we believe in live and let live. And we will protest and complain when they block our roads, but we won't actually burn anyone down or threaten to kill their family. That's only on the dark left. That's their speciality. So Dr. Robert Winston, from being completely blind and deaf, got this tiny little window in his wall, his surrounding three-dimensional wall around him. He can just peep out of that window and say, men can be women, but I still believe in climate change. Oh, we must save the planet. So he's not been red-pilled. He's just been, call it tunnel vision. He can just see one thing. The light is poking in. Whereas other people whose lives are completely screwed up by lockdown, for example, are waking up thoroughly and saying, hang on a minute, we were locked down. Whether it's right or wrong virus-wise, I'm not qualified to say, but it was apparently not particularly useful compared to the countries that didn't lock down. But you would only lock down in an emergency where you were under very immediate threat. Otherwise, sometimes the consequences are worse than saving. And the thing that will really get rid of these viruses are effective vaccines, because if you don't have a vaccine, you'll be locked down for life, and it never stops it spreading, because as soon as you break the lockdown, it will spread as it did in China. So you're not avoiding anything, you're just slowing it down and thinning it out. But you know, do you want a lump of shit on the floor? Do you want to nice comb it out and slime it around a bit? Still the same amount. But the point is that these people woke up from lockdown, and they didn't just wake up and say, I don't want to be locked down, because freedom, you know, you can get everything in prison, but it's still a punishment because you've got no freedom. So they broke out of their cages. I don't want to be locked down. They're not doing it to me again. And anyone that's going to lock me down must be an absolute swine, and we're going to check them out. And yes, they're absolute swines, and they're red-pilled, and they see everything clearly. And they join the army of the light workers. So they're on our side. And you just need a certain amount of that to kick the whole lot out. It is like the pipe has been blocked, there's a huge turd in it, and the pressure is building and building, and once the pressure builds up enough, the whole thing pops out. You don't just lose a little bit because the pipe is either blocked or unblocked. You just get a trickle of water coming out, in this case a trickle of truth and light and goodness. It will take over, and all the rubbish will just be swept away like a dam bursting, and all these climate change nutters, and all the roads will be opened again, and the wind farms will be put out to grass, and the solar panels on the fields will be taken away and done whatever they can do with old solar panels, not much. And we'll get all our gas boilers back, and our light bulbs and cars, and basically it will be slightly better than it is now by a long way. And we won't have any of the laws which say, oh, it's hate speech. Well, who decides what's hate speech? Well, hate speech is what certain authorities hate at the time. So if you say it against one religion, it's hate speech. But if you say it about another religion, it doesn't matter, because hate speech is really in the eye of who writes the law. Because we already have laws to stop people lying. It's called libel and slander, defamation. We have laws to stop people inciting crimes and violence. So you don't need hate speech law, because they're words. And if you're just being rude to someone, that's part of life. I became immune to those words by the time I left primary school, because being Jewish and the smallest boy in the class for 7 years or so is enough to make you immune to just about every insult on earth, and also teaches you how to fight properly, so that's a bonus. So you know, having your wings clipped to stop you flying too far, or having your legs cut off to stop you running in the classroom, are two bad penalties to avoid something which is probably harmless. And that's what they're doing to you now. So the people who have realised it and woken up and red-pilled from the lockdown are coming on our side and seeing all the other stuff. So we've got the lockdown, we've got the 15-minute cities, and it's all for a climate lockdown, permanent climate lockdown, and moving you out of the single family dwellings will soon be gone. They want us to share our houses so that we don't take up so much space, and people will be charged for any rooms that they're not using. The current Labour policy is to penalise people who live in houses after people move out, even if they're not council houses. So they'll have bedroom taxes for people who aren't using their spare bedrooms after their children have left. That's nice. Sounds a bit like communism to me, because it's communism. It's even worse than communism. It's a combination between communism and fascism, which I would call an open prison or hell on earth, because that's what they're trying to do. And what's the next thing? That the EU, now if we'd stayed in the EU, this would be happening to us as well. They're putting ground crickets in our food. I don't know if they're actually labelling it so people who are vegetarian or kosher don't have to eat them, but the fact they are putting ground crickets in loads of food in the EU, is there an excuse to put ground insects, you know, creepy crawlers, in people's food for any reason, when there's plenty of food? And they're also, yes, making all the schools and care homes in a certain part of Scotland vegetarian to save the planet, and they're going to ban all internal flights in France over a certain distance, and Labour want to do that over here. And Edinburgh, I think, are going to have vegetarian schools, so all the kids will grow up with rickets, and 5'6" will be the tallest person in the class, just like the old days. As I say, we're going back to Dickens and before then, all to save the planet. Well, not eating meat won't do growing children any good, because their growth will be stunted. You know, they won't all be taking vitamins. Oh, well, we can't have meat, so we're going to eat vitamin B12. I don't think many Scottish parents are going to give their children vitamin supplements when their meat has been cut out somehow. Just a theory. So the good news is that in the end the light overcomes darkness. It's 2 against 1. We have right on our side. So what they're doing is they're stretching the red lines further and further so that the people are staying in the same place, but the red lines are going further and further and taking more people into the, oh my God, I've got to wake up, because we've all got a threshold for waking up. And some of us are born awake and some of us are woken up by something. I got woken up when I saw that the sea levels weren't actually rising compared to what they said they would do under this global warming, which was before climate change. So I looked up to see why the sea levels weren't rising if the temperature was meant to be rising, and found out that there was barely any of either of them, and it was all absolute nonsense which can be dismissed in an hour of diagrams, which I've all put on my website. So if you're prepared to wake up, as I say, it's a waste of time trying to wake up those who aren't awake, but if you get better information to those who need it and understand it and work together, more people are coming on our side, we'll get more power, and in the end we will win. Don't know how long it'll take, we've got to do it, because the alternative is far worse. Now on the spiritual side, because it's all spiritual, things are speeding up. Things which were happening occasionally before are now happening a lot and to more people and in greater forms. I mean, a miracle is a miracle. Don't get small miracles, but you get miracles which can be seen or witnessed by more people and corroborated. So that way they are bigger miracles, because they are harder to ignore or dismiss or, you know, excuse away for being random coincidences, because if it happens 10 times in a day, I don't think it is. So we've got guidance where you are supposed to be here and you end up there, and if you hadn't been diverted, turned left, blocked in the road, delayed, etc., you wouldn't have been where you ended up for the thing or the person you were supposed to meet. I mean, I was out locally taking photos last year, and I was going to go home. I got a call from my mother, oh, I've fallen over, can you come and help me? Turned left, ended up in Golders Green, and the road was closed because of some water main. I had to turn right, turn left and turn left again, and one of my old girlfriends was there who was married, and she was crossing the road. She didn't recognise me because I had a hat and a beard on, so she didn't remember that, you know, what I looked like. I said, it's me, you know. She said, oh my goodness, it's you. So we had a little chat. It turned out a poor woman, her husband had died young, and she was on her own. And she then told me that if she hadn't have hurt her foot further down, she would have been 15 minutes further down the road when I happened to cross the road, and wouldn't have seen her and wouldn't have got her phone number off her and got back in touch and become friends again. And that was completely impossible without every single one of those on both of ours being diverted or delayed, or both. So, you know, those are the examples, and they're happening so much now. It's impossible to say, well, it's just a coincidence. And the synchronicities where you hear a word or a sentence or a phrase on the radio as you're reading it, or you're looking on the internet and you hear it and they say it on the radio, or somebody on the phone says it and you read it on the internet, happens all the time. When you tell people about it, they say, oh, it happened to me, and then, you know, they'll ring you up and say it's happened again, it's happened again. And once you become aware of it, it happens more. This is the system waking us up again. It's saying it's not physical. The physical is on the surface, 99% of it is behind the surface, and we're showing it to you gradually. There's something going on. It's all got a network behind it of energy which is running this program. So the first thing is to see through it and see what's going on, and then when you become a master, you can actually start playing with it and changing things directly. But not many people can do that yet, so I wouldn't worry about that. That's another story. But dealing with the evil, but knowing that it's spiritual and it's there, so that you'll never make the same mistake again, because never in history have the authorities worked together for the entire world, and the internet's been there to find out it's going on in most of the world, so that everyone can see it all together and see this is a huge block of crap that needs to be lifted out, thrown away and burnt in the pit of fire, and it won't come back, because people will remember it and say, well, they're not going to be fooled twice. Look, in the 21st century they were fooled by the climate change scam and the lockdowns, and they were made to eat bugs and cut off their heating to save the planet. What bunch of wankers. Because the point is they'll say, because they're wise after the event, say, oh, we won't fall for that. But of course not, because you're learning from our mistakes. And, you know, we all learn from our mistakes. The smart people learn from other people's mistakes and not their own. And the smarter, normal people don't make the same mistake twice. Only the idiots make the same mistake twice. So you're not going to get this happening here, and they're not going to come back and do it in 30 years or 50 years and start another European German empire like we've got now. Because people will say, well, you know, we now know that whatever's on the wrapper and it says, you know, you've got a cake here and you eat the cake and inside the cake there's a little bomb and you explode when you've finished. I'm not going to eat that EU cake because it's going to blow me up. It's all about seeing beneath the surface. All of this is seen through the illusions, and it's a mirror, so I'm combing it the wrong way. Never mind, just, you know, enjoy the messy hair. So all of this is seeing through the illusions, not believing authority, not believing consensus, and trusting your own gut feeling. Because in the end, you know the answers to everything. You just have to stop and quiet yourself and think about it. Is this good? Is this hurting anyone? Is it hurting me? Is it worth hurting anyone? Is it worth the people who can't get home by car because they block the road and you can't actually get there by any known means unless you have the key to the puzzle, unless you have the code to get in and out? Nobody's life is long enough to be buggered up by petty authorities. We're not here to be ruled, we're not here to be governed or controlled. Nobody has the right to control anyone else unless they've done something that requires controlling. Most laws are not required in crime because most good people wouldn't break them anyway. Only bad people hurt other people, and the laws don't stop them doing it. They just catch them and punish them if they get caught, and many of them don't get caught and they carry on doing it, and they'll never get caught. Al Capone got done for tax evasion even though they knew what he'd done. Jimmy Savile never got caught. So the laws aren't going to make a huge amount of difference. People should just learn to behave properly and you wouldn't need to worry about it. So I think most of us know what's right and wrong, but we've lost the ability to discern in certain cases when they scare you so much that, you know, the seas are going to rise and flood the world by 2020. It's 2023, we've had nowhere flooded, and the sea has risen precisely 12 inches since 1850, which isn't very much. So I think we can safely say that that side of it is impossible to happen, because the CO2 is now up from 260 parts per million to 400 parts per million, which isn't very much in a million. And it won't really do very much because everything else is much stronger and more powerful than a few molecules of CO2 in a million of ours. But people still believe, and they say, oh, we'll give it time to see if it happens. Well, we've had 40 years now since the 80s when they first invented this shit. Nothing's happened. The only things that's happened are these extremely warm days by about 0.2 of a degree or something, except that some of the days were warmer, but I forgot to tell you that, because you can look up these extreme warm days. You find most of them were in the 1930s, because that's when they had the peak of the temperature around most of the world. But it's all there if you look it up. So hopefully there is good news on the horizon, because more and more people get pissed off when they're locked down or told that men are women and they know they're not. So we've got this funny uniting between the left and the right, because feminists have been traditionally on the left because identity politics is part of Marxism. Marxism is as far left as you can get. But the feminists have been red-pilled by the transgender, because they're saying, oh my God, our identity is being completely, you know, threatened with this culturally appropriating men taking on woman face. So they say the difference between a right-wing person who doesn't believe in men becoming women and vice versa, and a left-wing person who does, is that the right-wing people don't agree with abortion and the left-wing do, which is fair enough. But the left-wingers are now taking on the Robert Winston tunnel vision. They do have a window now saying, this is the line we will not cross, we will not accept a man can change sex, which is true, just as some of the much more subtle things are true. And blocking people's roads doesn't help you, because even if you don't own a car, you do need deliveries, and you do need emergency vehicles, and the road humps which stop people driving more than 20 miles an hour without shattering the underneath of their car, as I did with my petrol tank once. They've got public transport, buses going over them, ambulances have to drive slower, fire engines have to drive slower, etc, etc. It fucks everything up for everyone, but they still keep them. Why do they keep them? Don't ask me. And each road hump costs £10,000, and the average road with humps has about 20 of them, so that's £200,000 flushed down the toilet to ruin your car. How's that? So these are the sort of things, and the more you focus on the harm that they cause and not on the supposed benefits which they can't cause, you'll realise you're being completely fooled and made an idiot out of, and it's your own fault for accepting it, because without the millions and millions of people who believe this climate consensus and believe that cars are a bad thing and that we must eat insects and stop eating meat for the planet, without them none of this would happen, because it's the useful idiots that Lenin described, that the evil people can't work without their consent and their belief. And once that goes away, once somebody can be woken up with that one window, that one tunnel to their heart and to their mind of the truth, men can't become women. Correct. What about the climate? What about lockdowns? What about vegetarianism to save the planet? It's all in the same bollocks department. And you know, some people will wake up and the veil will be lifted and they'll be red pilled, and others it'll be just a little hole, but it's better than nothing. But we only need the pressure to build up to a certain level with people being red pilled. They will vote Reform Party in Hackney, get rid of all these roadblocks, they'll take the roadblocks out, and other people say, oh look what they've done in Hackney, we should do it here. Because the domino effect is much quicker with freedom than it is with this slow build up of the walls. It takes a long time to build a wall, but it takes a very short time to knock it down. We're knocking down the walls. We're not going to be treated like dirt anymore and treated like we're a cancer on the planet, which is what the green people say about humanity is a cancer on the planet. David Suzuki among others, lovely people. So I think that just about sums it up where we are today. It is a spiritual fight and we are winning, and we can speed it up by acting on what we know and informing the people who are just about wavering in person. Don't know about the internet, they seem to ignore it, but in person I found people could be a lot more amenable, especially if they know and trust you and know you're not working for a fossil fuel company or somebody else they don't trust. Because don't worry if people are qualified or not, that means absolutely nothing. This is about common sense, because just as many qualified doctors disagree on COVID and just as many qualified scientists disagree on the climate. It's not about how much you know, it's about how much you can process, because you always get expert opinions but you can't get expert common sense, because you've either got that or you haven't. You can't learn that in college. So with that, I will wish you all good luck, and when I have more information I will come back. Goodbye.